Hello and welcome to Muse Jam Session recording 162. My name is Dani Beaumont and I am a product manager on the Adobe Muse team. I am joined today by one of my colleagues, Wei Xing from our engineering group. I'm going to drag him up here. He's going to help me out with some of the questions in the chat pod as we go along. The reason for the dueling banjo, in fact I'm going to make him a presenter here. There you go. The reason for the dueling banjos is this is a session that's give and take. So we learn from you and you learn from us. You are welcome in the chat to talk about pretty much anything, ideally Muse related, but it doesn't have to be. And my colleagues will help keep an eye on the chat. If there's topics that I'm covering during the session and you want to make sure I address it, that question pod in the lower right hand area is a great place to hang out. And this session will be recorded. It will be pushed up to YouTube, so if you have any sound trouble or want to skip around, you're welcome to always jump to the YouTube instances. That will be posted on Facebook a little later today. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Now, we do a variety of sessions, and this one is a little bit on the new user side, so I am going to step through some of the basics here today. If you're new to Muse, a great place to hang out is muse.adobe.com. Obviously, I have been remiss and I did not update the upcoming sessions, including the one we're doing now. But the upcoming live event area is a great way to see what is coming down the pipe. Another place that's probably a little fresher tends to be the Facebook page in the events area. It's likely how you saw this session. So for those of you that are talking about what's coming new for Muse and when we'll have an update, one little tip might be the fact that in the events page we have a session on June 18th all about what's new with Muse. And something tells me I'm not going to be talking about what I've already been talking about in the past. So that's probably a great place to jump in and see either the recording or the live session for the latest feature set that we are offering with the product. If you are new to Muse, back in the microsite on the tutorials section, we tend to break out a good chunk of learn content here. You'll notice there's both videos and articles, depending on how you like to learn. There's a What's New section. There's also the Learn More section, which has some deeper dive articles that are of greater length. What's New tends to be some quick 2-minute videos and such. But it's a great place to be. The Widget tab takes you through a directory of widgets. This is not anything that is sold, but it allows you to click through to that which is sold and buy some of the widgets that are out there in the market to extend the functionality of Muse. So Muse by design is an extensible application that uses a third-party API structure to allow you to extend the application. And the reason why we do that is multifold. One is we don't have as many engineers as you think we do, so it allows us to extend the application with an army of vendors, of Muse users that have learned how to develop extensions for the application. There's also the fact that Muse is, the web is an open standard and data is dynamic, and generating dynamic data that can be included in a website works really well with plugins and widgets that you add within the application. So things like shopping carts, blogs, and such can be easily added to the application and styled using some of these widgets. And sort of to begin the conversation on that, about a month ago, we put together a new website. It's called Nomad Dreamers. It's a demo site, and I work with some of the vendors, Cookie.com and Chris Kellett of 123 Muse. But it is a nice spot to come to if you're new to the idea of widgets. It allows you to see probably not the best widgets out there. Chris Kellett built them for me, and I didn't ask him to really compete with widget developers as much as show how widgets can function. So by coming to the Nomad Dreamer site, I'll go ahead and copy that and actually put it into the chat pod real quick for easy access. Okie doke. By coming to the Nomad Dreamer site, you can click into any individual widget, which takes you to the widget directory, where you can read an online tutorial. This is going to be, it's actively being localized into the 18 languages that Muse supports. So if English is not your native language, definitely check out the tutorials that will be out there in a few weeks. There's also tech support. Sweet little Chris Kellett from 123 Muse is helping with any technical questions around these widgets. But definitely a great place to just get your feet wet with some free widgets that are part of that Nomad Dreamer site. So have at it. It's there just to show off, to demonstrate the functionality of widgets. There's also the Adobe.com product page for Muse. And if you haven't discovered it, in that product page, there's a section called Learn and Support. And once you click into Learn and Support, if you click on Show All Tutorials, this is a pretty broad spectrum of all of the help and support content that's out there, not just from the Muse team. You'll see a lot of videos from me, but there's a lot from third-party providers, people that do training for a living that are in love with Muse and want to teach that. There are channels on Vimeo and YouTube along those lines, and many of the widget providers, I guess maybe the last thing I'll do is click on the Resources tab. This is a bit long in the tooth. It was back in the day when Muse was young, but there is a section here for templates and widgets, and more around the world of templates. Since we do have a widget directory, that's a great place to find content. But if you're looking for templates, these providers have been around for a while. They're usually developed, they, as far as I know, have original content that they're distributing. If they're not, well, they get in trouble. So original content around templates and widgets. There's lots of tutorials and videos there as well for extending Muse. So I encourage you to check that out as well. All right, that is probably big stuff up front. I'm going to go ahead and bring up chat a little bit, make sure that the world is good here. And let's go ahead and swing into the application. So today's session is focused on publishing. And I'm going to step through some of these bits here, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about how, just some variations on how that publishing works. I guess one more call out for help content. If you're in the Muse application, you may have closed this, but if you click on the Help drop-down and go to Welcome, this page will bring up, and it depends on where you are in the world. This is an English-speaking test that we're doing. We call it Hello because it begins with hello in your name. But this is also a nice feeder to see some short little videos and help and support content. We'll continue, for example, that new in February area will probably be updated pretty soon to talk about what's new in Muse. And in the application, this is a great way to kind of get a sense of that. So back over to the Create tab, we're going to work on a starter file. This is another area that I've been working on. In addition to that Nomad Dreamer widget site, I'll actually give you a link to this one as well to take a look at. If you go to musestarters.com, just going to look for a second and see what I got there. Yeah, actually we're going to hold off on that one for just a little bit. But I am working with a starter file, and the starter file will be delivered with the application. The idea is to let folks that are in trial mode or very new to Muse have some starting websites that they can work with to build out your first site. And I'm going to use one. It's called Cave, and it's a restaurant site. The reason why I'm holding off is until we do ship our next release, it requires the beta release of the product to be able to actually open up the file. So hold off just a little longer. This will be launched with lots of those other updates in a few weeks, as you might guess. So we're going to hold off on that, but we're going to go ahead and use that Cave example today. All right, so the idea around publishing, I guess I'll give a little bit of historical bits on Muse. When we first shipped the Muse application, we tightly coupled it with something called Adobe Business Catalyst, and it's a hosting platform that we acquired about 7 years ago. And it's a back-end content management system. And to some extent, it was our hypothesis that if you use Muse and host it on that platform, we would give you an all-in-one solution that made the world perfect. But I think what we found very quickly is that back-end solutions are as varied as your customer. And your customer is always right. Whatever it is that they want, it's the right answer. And in back-end solutions, things like blogs and shopping carts and such that are out there really vary. Also, hosting platforms. You may want to have pre-existing hosting. Your client already has hosting with someone. Or you work in a large organization and you have an intranet and you still want to be able to publish with Muse. For that reason, we really extended the directions and the places you can go to publish your site. Now for this Cave site, let's go ahead and click in for a moment and just talk about what I have set up here, because there are a couple tips that I can show you around publishing with the application that I think are kind of fun and may stretch out this hour-long session for us a little bit longer. So first off, when you're building your site, you have the ability to define the resolution with which that site is going to be generated. So if I pull down under File to Site Properties, what you'll see is in the Site Property window here under Content, I have this set to high DPI or 2x resolution. This is a feature I think we shipped maybe a year ago at this point. Muse just turned 3 2 weeks ago, so it's only been shipping for 3 years, and we're working on our 12th update for the product. So it gets a little blurry to figure out what happened when. But high DPI in essence says, you know what, there are displays like a Retina Macintosh or an iPhone or Surface Pro from Windows or a 4K monitor, let's say. And they all are high resolution displays. Now, sometimes designers want to take advantage of high resolution displays, but not at the expense of their viewers' experience. So when we implement this 2x resolution or high DPI instance, it allows us to serve up both 2x or double resolution images and standard images. And then asynchronously, as you load up a page, load up the lower version, the standard version, and then seamlessly load the high DPI version when the bandwidth is there. So this just magically happens in Muse, and we do have some jam sessions that talk about optimizing your site for that. But I wanted to point out that this site has the high DPI set to it. And you'll notice in the design, things like icons that I've placed here have a 2x indicator letting us know that it's twice the resolution. For things like background images, because a background image can be scaled to fill a container, like your browser, we usually bring that higher resolution and we stick with the higher resolution pretty much because we're not sure how large you're going to go. So we give you the full data in case you want to scale that browser to be larger. But I've got my site set up and I've got a series of assets. And at this point I have a couple of options for as I'm working, judging the design that I'm working with. So built into the application, we have one of 4 workspace layouts here on the right, and the third one says Preview. And Preview is using whatever built-in browser you have on your system. So if it's a Mac, it's going to use one browser, PC it'll use another. But it's kind of one quick way to take a look at what's going on your site. Now I personally don't use it a lot. It kind of frustrates me because there's no previous and next button. I can't see the URL that's being used on the page. But it is there and it can be handy for just quick previews. If I go back into design mode here, the next best way that I'm going to preview or take a look at what's going on in my site will be to preview it in the browser. So for that, I can pull down under File to either preview the page that I'm working on if I know I'm just focusing on that one page, or to preview the entire site in the browser. Now Muse is going to come through and render the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but rather than pushing it out onto the web, pushing it out live in any way, it's just allowing me to preview to my individual device here. So this is also known as localhost, but it's using my IP address and it's rendering the site. And as I mentioned, I have the advantage now of being really in the browser. I can see my URL here. I can jump between pages. I can go back and forth. So that preview in browser is really just running. It's cached on my machine. And that's a terrific way. I use that a lot, especially with things like scroll effects, to just test exactly how something will manifest. The design canvas gives you a good sense of it, but the browser gives you a much better sense of it. Now, as you're working, you can always grab this URL and copy and paste it into another browser if you'd like. So if you want to, I've got Firefox and Safari on my machine. I could just copy and paste that, and that same local host, that same rendering would apply to those browsers. I don't have to preview in browser and change my default browser for that purpose. But I get some bit of a good sense here as I'm working. Now let's say I'm ready to actually share it with colleagues by way of email or share it with my client, let's say. The next step I can take is to use that Adobe Business Catalyst hosting platform to create a trial. So at this point, if my design's in pretty good shape, I'm going to pull down this time under File, and by the way, you can always do it here. Notice there's a Publish button. If I click the Publish button, it's going to default to that trial mode where it's listed here as Business Catalyst. I also can, in the drop-down, switch between FTP and export, and we're going to talk about each of those now. But I'll go with that default Business Catalyst to create a trial. I'm just going to hit that Publish button. Muse is going to go in and say, you know what, Dani, you've already published this up to Business Catalyst. That's okay. Let's say I'm working on a new variation of the Cave design. In the options drop down here, even after I've published something live, I can come in and at the very top select a new site. And I may change this to say New Cave. Now what you'll notice is as I was typing that in, watch, I just said new. Business Catalyst is quickly looking through everything that's been pushed out there on a trial or a live site and making sure that I have a unique name. Now it's creating a pretty awful name because new has been used about 1,000,000 times. So it's using a little time date stamp to give me a unique URL, which is pretty awful. So I'm just going to keep typing until I get something unique. So new K obviously has been used before. I'm going to go ahead and call it Cave. And notice that it's showing me how that URL is going to be created. I could always come in and just say New Cave and it will create automatically an appropriate URL. So I wouldn't want a space in the name. It's just going to concatenate that into a single name. And from there I can come in and publish it to a brand new site. There's something called Universal Direct versus Business Catalyst Direct. And this really has to do with just the way that Business Catalyst, the hosting platform, is going to redirect viewers of the site to either a tablet or smartphone device. If you stick with Universal, you're pretty much universally okay. That works on Business Catalyst as well. And it relies on JavaScript redirects. That's the methodology we use for all third-party hosting platforms. And that's a pretty safe way to go. I can also select the data center. This is interesting if I'm in the States, but I'm working on a Japanese website for viewers that are going to predominantly be in Asia. I would probably choose the Australian server because that's over on that side of the world. And data centers will load more quickly geographically in general. So I could choose that. If I had a site for the UK, for example, I could go ahead and publish that on the European Union data center to be more centrally located. I'll go ahead and stick it with automatic and click OK. And as I mentioned, Muse is going to come in and render all of the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for this trial and create that domain for me. Now, trials are unlimited. You can create as many as you want with Muse. And to be honest, if all you ever want to do is have a decent URL like newcave.businesscatalyst.com, if it doesn't matter to you, you're done. Your site is live. You can share that URL. We say that trials are temporary, but they honestly don't really expire. They will stay up there. Now, one point that's important to understand is, let's say you are working with a pretty confidential bit of information. Let's say the Cave client is not ready to see the site. I want to share it with a colleague of mine in the New York office. Or I just want to make sure that all of the customers for the Cave restaurant will not see this site. Even though I have created a site and it's hosted on Business Catalyst, it will not be picked up by search engines by default. So anything in the subdomain for Business Catalyst that has Business Catalyst in that subdomain is not handed over. It cannot be crawled. So you're not going to wake up on Tuesday with this trial live and find out that the Google has found your site before you were ready to show it to your client or your client was ready to launch it. You're pretty safe about with that. But I can come in and publish up that trial, and as I mentioned, I now have a URL that I could share with one of my colleagues and have them take a look at the design. Pretty straightforward. Some nuances here. Let's say I do have a live site. You'll notice that when I did come in and hit publish there, it had said to me Muse Starters, and that's where I had defined it in the past. I now have New Cave as a domain here, and that's great. Let's say I'm working with a live site and I want to let the site owner take a look at it. I want to do some benchmark testing, but I'm not really ready for the real world to see it yet. One nice feature that Muse does support is the ability to publish to subfolders. So notice how it says folder on server. I could come in and just call this stage. By hitting /stage, it's going to republish the entire site in that subfolder directory. Let's go ahead and do that just for the heck of it. So we've got stage and then the New Cave. In fact, I probably need to give this, nope, let's try that. I'm going to click OK. So stage will end up being a folder, and inside the folder we'll have the index.html, which is the first page on that site. So to be clear, if you have a live site and you want to test some pages or test the entire site, you can publish to a subfolder. That will have it not appear at the root. People that go to, let's say, cave.com would not see the cave.com/stage/index file. So it's a good way to hide things a bit here. Notice that my landing page now is at the domain that I created with a /stage and then the content there as well. So publishing to subfolders can be a nice way to have multiple sites on a single domain. If you own one domain and you want to host lots of websites and you have the space and it's supported by your third-party hosting platform, it's a great way to just bury things in and nest them, in essence, under primary areas. All right, so I've done that. That's all published. The world's all good. At this point, when my client says, I love it, let's push it live, I can either choose to upgrade that site to a paid site. Now, if you've been licensing Muse in the past, as long as you are a Creative Cloud licensee that has owned the Creative Cloud for more than about 2 months, your Creative Cloud license includes 5 sites that can be upgraded with real live domains that you purchase from a third-party domain provider. So let's say you want to take the Cave site live and you don't have hosting anywhere and you do have a Creative Cloud license. I would go and buy a domain. Let's say it's caverestaurant.com. And what you're able to do is then come in and upgrade that site to a paid site. Now the way you would do that, let's just go in and dig in here a little bit. We've got new cavebusinesscatalyst.com. I'm going to go ahead and type in admin, which is going to take me to the back-end hosting platform of my site. Now I have to remember my login here, which I believe is this. Logins, there's so many to choose from, isn't it? Good guess. So, I'm going to avoid doing this right now if it'll let me, and define them later. So what I've done is logged into that trial that I created, newcavebusinesscatalyst.com. Because I have been a Creative Cloud subscriber for more than 2 months, we changed this about 2 months ago. So if you have had your account more than 2 months, you get these 5 free hosting sites. So notice here I have web hosting free site. I can click launch site. Now, I really don't want to do that yet because of just what I was about to see. Because I do this all the time, I've used all 5 of my free slots. And now I'm offered to pay to upgrade my site. But those 5 slots are available. And it is possible if you log into your Creative Cloud account to delete any of the sites that you're no longer using if you're like me and you've used up the 5 slots that you had there. So it is possible once you've created this trial to upgrade it to a paid site. And as I mentioned, it can be up to 5 paid sites on the Business Catalyst hosting platform. Now, another probably more mainline way that you might want to work is your client already has hosting, or you want to have email associated with your hosting. Both of those scenarios are good reasons to go ahead and get third-party hosting that you'll use with your Muse account. So for the Cave site, if I want to now FTP it up to a third-party hosting platform, what I can do is pull down on File to, instead of publishing to Business Catalyst, I'm going to select Upload to FTP Host. Alternatively, I just come to the drop-down here, select FTP Host, and it's going to bring up the FTP attributes, or the options that I have here. Now I'm going to do some quick thinking because I don't have Cave hosted on GoDaddy. But I actually want to show you a trick which is pretty good. I still have that ability to publish to subfolders. So I'm going to go to Ike's Bike Shop. Wow, and I'm going to crash. It's a good thing we have an engineer in the meeting with us. Let's try that one more time. Opening up my Muse application. Taking a sip of my soda pop because I have the time. I'm going to pull down on File to upload to FTP and set those attributes again. So this is FTP. Username is Ike Designer, I think. And this is, of course, that password. This either works or it doesn't. FTP is so intimidating when you're figuring out the first attributes. Let's try this. Now, the way you FTP is going to be specific to each hosting platform. So GoDaddy, for example, has a different set of attributes than others. All right, close your eyes for a minute. Seriously, I got to go look at my password. I'm going to be right back. I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay, coming back. All right, how about this guy? Be kind to me. Just do it. So after you fiddle around with FTP for a while, let's make our life a little easier. I'm going to open up. You know, the truth is, it doesn't matter all that much. So what you'll do is come in and set your FTP attributes. When you are doing so, there's a second screen that allows you to publish to a subfolder again. So I could have ikesbikeshop.sf/stage and have the Cave site hosted on that sub-hosting platform. And the beauty of FTP is one that as you publish, the first time it's going to upload all of the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You can use third-party FTP tools, but I really want to emphasize you got to know what you're doing, and there's got to be a real reason why you don't use our built-in FTP. What we do is something that Dreamweaver does as well. We keep a manifest of changes. So the first time I would publish up the Cave site, I could publish it up, and all of my HTML, CSS, and JavaScript would be there. The second time I go to publish it, Muse looks at the manifest, and it says, what did Dani change in the local instance of her Muse site as compared to what's on that third-party hosting platform? If the changes are known, Muse is going to render what is different and upload the changes. Now, that manifest says what's happened in the live instance and what's on the local instance. The thing that's really important is you say, yeah, that's fine, I can do that. I know what's new with my FTP client. But Muse also deletes all of the old stuff in the remote instance. And that very subtle behavior can get you into a lot of trouble. We had a lot of support calls before we had our own internal FTP client. So using that client will keep the manifest, and it's going to only publish the changes that it sees as you're working. So kind of a really important thing to keep in mind as you start to get more experimental with the work you're doing in Muse. Another thing that's really interesting is a backdoor, depending on the type of person you are. Let's say I am working with Cave, and I'm a web designer. Obviously, I'm using Muse, and my client wants to use in-browser editing to make changes to a section on the site each week. Now, my client may be an amazing photographer, but chances are my client is not going to have the skills to create the kind of beautiful images that I can create. Now, as a designer, what I can do, if I know that the Cave restaurant is going to rotate, let's say they have a featured dinner pairing the first week of every month, and they want to update that. They don't want to pay me to do it, so they're going to do it by way of in-browser editing. What I can do as a web designer is in the assets folder, I can sort of cook the books. I can pre-upload a number of images that they can access later on. So the trick for doing that, I'm going to bring up the assets panel here, and I have all of my assets that are in this area. If I click by the little page icon, it'll show me which page that content has been uploaded to. And let's just kind of extend this use case a little bit. Up in the header area, I have an image. And let's say my site owner wants to change this image from month to month to talk about the featured pairings section. So let's say this was actually a featured pairings, right? Don't know that that was necessary there, but so this monthly feature pairing section, and this image that's placed here is going to change. What I can do is basically pull down on File to add, no, let me just think, add files for upload. So I'm going to let Muse know that there are additional files outside the ones that are built into this direct design. So they don't need to occur anywhere in the design at the moment. That's okay. I'm going to come on into this Cave directory a little bit here, where I have a number of images. And I've got quite a few background images here, as you can see. So there's a number of images, and I'd like to have them available so that my site owner can come in and make a change to this area. What I'll do is go ahead and select those. Now I don't need, let's just see, don't need all of them, but we'll go ahead and for safe measure select them all. So I'll just come in and say Command A to select all, and I'm going to select Open. What you'll notice is in the Muse application now, I've got a series of images that have this little up arrow indicating that they will be uploaded. The magic will happen is that all of those images will be uploaded, and in the in-browser editing window, if my client wants to swap out an image for another image, they can do so. In that browser UI, it will show them all of the images that have been added to the site. So you could rotate through there. I could also every 6 months push up new images so that I know my client has a fresh set to work with that have been cropped and have had the proper filter applied to those images. Now as a designer, if you went and did that and you don't want to continue to have them there, let's say you made a mistake and you didn't mean to have all of these extra images be uploaded with your design. It makes it extra heavy to publish each time you're pushing it up. You always have the ability to come in and here in the Assets panel, if you right-click on an item in that panel, you'll see an option here that says Delete Unused Files for Upload. So that's a way for Muse to quickly say, every image in this asset folder needs to have a link to something in the live site. And if there is not a link, I'm going to go ahead and delete that or remove it. So that would be deleted at that point. Let's leave this alone because I want to talk about a third method of publishing that has kind of some interesting capabilities. And that is exporting to an HTML folder. Now you kind of got a warning from me that says if you do not know that you are a master of FTP, I encourage you to use our FTP client. Unless there's a distinct reason why you can't use ours, I would stick with using ours. But we do support the ability to create a folder and export all of the optimized content to that folder so that you can use your own FTP client or do other things. So let's talk about that a little bit. So I'm here in the site, and I'm now in the drop-down going to go to Export as HTML. Now I'm asked first off, what is the URL that I'm working with? And this URL is relevant in the fact that we're creating a sitemap, and the sitemap needs to know the domain. So let's say I know I'm going to go to www.cava restaurant.com. So I'm just giving it the URL that I will use when I eventually upload the content to a third-party hosting platform, and I'll come in and create a directory. That's as good as anything. Go to my desktop, and we'll just create an output folder. And I'll select Choose, and then I click OK. Muse comes in, renders all of the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's going to have that manifest of changes, although your tool probably won't know how to keep a diff or a difference between the remote and the local content. You'll notice it's also noticing that the email address that I'm using is not cavarestaurant.com. So it's just warning me because lots of third-party hosting platforms do not want to send emails to locations other than the domain. But that's okay for what we're doing right now. It's not really an issue. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to jump out to the desktop. Let's take a look at those files. So on the desktop, I have a folder. It's called Output, as we know. And in it, there's some stuff. Let's just kind of dissect the stuff that gets uploaded when you push a site somewhere with Muse. I've got a CSS folder, which has some different styles based on my design. If you are a designer and you work with a development team, and the development team does not want you to publish directly, they don't want you to render the code, they're very precious about hand coding their site, they can still find a great deal of value from the exported folder that you deliver to them. First thing that's valuable is the assets. The assets are going to be, this is everything that we suggested would be uploaded. So these are all those images that I just pushed up for no good reason other than to have them available on the hosting platform and to allow my client to use in-browser editing to switch images out. So that assets folder's there. If you are a developer, you're working with developers, this can be a lot of stuff. This could be a bucket of PDF files. This could be some scary code stuff like JavaScript code. If your developer wants it up there and can point to an assets folder to do intelligent things, you can upload lots of good stuff in that directory. The CSS can be useful to your developer. You can look at the global CSS styles that are being used on the site and copy that into some hand coding scenario if you'd like. Another good one is images. So we talked about that idea of high DPI images. And the fact that I wanted to optimize for both standard and high DPI resolutions. When Muse works with your images, it's going to look at the image if it has transparency or not. If it has transparency, it's going to optimize it as a PNG file with transparency, which is slightly larger than JPEG. But JPEG is going to give you good compression, and it's going to give you good fidelity in the browser. But if you took your camera and you took a 10 megapixel image, let's say this background image, and it's highly likely this is a very large background image here on the side. But when it is optimized in the images directory here, notice that these are only about 200K. They're much smaller based on the content. We go through and we will subsample your image to the maximum that is necessary for high DPI, that 2x resolution. If you had it set to standard, it's going to bring it down even more. But those images are optimized in this folder. Another thing is we are in dire need, believe me, I know as much if not more than you do, that we need a collection tool, some means by which you can say there's my Muse file and I have all this placed stuff and I need to give it to someone else. And there's no easy way to gather all the images if you did not put them in the same folder as the Muse file. It can be clumsy to do that. This is a great lazy way to do collection for your images. Because what I can do at this point is with this folder of images now, I can open up my Muse file and point to this directory. And I know that all the images are contained within the folder when I package it up and give it to someone else. Notice what we've done here as well is we may have created some images. There's the submit button, for example, and I've got it both at 2x resolution and standard resolution. We've got FS here, and then there it is at twice the resolution. So what we do is we'll render that double resolution, that high resolution instance, and then in code we're going to reference the standard image and then load the 2x image when it's necessary. So this is all in that directory. If we look a little bit further, there's the index location menu. These are the actual HTML pages. There's that manifest. And that manifest is what is keeping track of all of the files and what's been changed. So this is what we use to look at the remote instance. Probably not as interesting to you. We have a phone directory, and in the phone directory is the unique CSS and HTML. Any images that are used by phone or tablet will be up in the images folder. It's only the HTML and CSS we separate out. Any JavaScript or PHP scripts we might be using for forms and such are in that folder. And then there's your sitemap.xml. If you are using a third-party FTP tool, you're going to want to make sure this is there. And you're going to also want to make sure tools like Google search engine know where the sitemap is. They will crawl this sitemap, and anytime you make changes to the site, they'll be recorded in the sitemap, and that's what lets search engines know that there's new content that they should pay attention to, and that improves your search engine ranking. All right, that is the extent to which I can milk this idea of publishing. So I'm going to swing back to chat and see what you guys are talking about, and what it is that I can answer for you for questions. Bruce is probably helping me to debug my FTP. I don't know. I mean, it always takes me a while. I have some notes, but it's different with every hosting platform. So it sounds like there was some discussion around the hosting. When you have your Creative Cloud license, it includes 5 basic sites on the Business Catalyst hosting platform. Those basic sites cost you nothing, but they do not include email. If you wanted to have email or any other like CMS functionality, you can upgrade that to a higher plan, but it costs money. So the basic plan does not include email support with the domain. You can always, when you build your Muse site, point to your Yahoo email address. You do not have to use the domain's email hosting if you don't want to. It may give you an alert saying, hey, GoDaddy would appreciate if you had an email on the domain that you're using. It may warn you of that. And in all honesty, if GoDaddy has trouble providing your emails for you, if it's not sending them to the Yahoo account, you can create a second email that has the domain in it in the form as you fill it out, and that'll probably avoid the error. But you'll have to see with your hosting how that works specifically. Okay, so can I elaborate on email selections? I would suggest if you're looking at what it costs on the Adobe Business Catalyst platform to just kind of look at their product page and look at the higher plans around pricing and such. I believe the jump goes from, you know, the free plan we give you usually costs about $5. I think it jumps to maybe $9 or $10 with email included, but you'd have to check for sure. All right, looks like all 3 of those questions were pretty much about that. They do not include it. Any other questions that you have for me? We are allowed to get out of class early today. As you know, us Beavers are busy working on the next version of Muse. We're very excited. Lots of work to be done in the workshop here. Just an aside, will we see blogging in Muse soon? I guess I have a few answers for you for that, and I don't mind showing this and talking about it because I think it's exciting. I wish there would be like one dumb blog that you could put into Muse that would make the world happy. I just don't believe it will. I think that, as I mentioned, your client's always right, and the blogging engine that works for them is the best blogging engine that's out there. I want to go back to the Nomad Dreamers site and really emphasize this for a moment. So on nomaddreamers.com, if you click on the news section, we have a blogging widget. And this widget is pretty amazing. It's unlike any other blogging widget that I've seen in that it uses RSS feed to inject the content into your Muse site. So the official argument around having your blog built into your hosting platform or your tool, like a WordPress blog, let's say, is that when your user goes in to make changes to their blog, the SEO for those changes gets credited to the blogging engine. So for example, if I used a Tumblr widget to include a Tumblr blog on my site, and the widget used an iframe methodology, I could jump and show you this, but I don't know that we have time. It used an iframe methodology to basically inject the content onto the Muse page. The downside is that Tumblr gets all the SEO credit because Google doesn't look inside an iframe and determine what's been changed there. It's like a window to the outside world. You can't tell how hot it is outside from inside the house. The RSS blog widget takes a different approach. What it does is takes blog content. So this is a Tumblr blog, and the Tumblr blog has text, it has dates, it has images. They're populated in that Tumblr blog. But the difference is that this widget is using an RSS feed to extract that blogging content and put it into your Muse site. So every time I go to Tumblr and make a change to this design, to this site content, add a new blog post, for example, the RSS injection will register that change as though I made it directly within Muse. Now this widget has been tested with WordPress. It works with WordPress, although the way they handle images is complicated, so we can't support images in a WordPress blog, but we are pulling over the text. It also works with Medium blog, Tumblr blog, pretty much any blogging engine that you can grab an RSS feed, this works with, which is incredibly powerful. It's a free widget. You can grab it from the directory. Now going back to the question, will we ever have a deeply embedded blogging engine? I think the Muse team is going to remain neutral on that because there is no one right answer, but I am working with some vendors that are doing some really interesting deep integrations with different CMSs that are externalized to Muse to allow you to have much richer control. So I would say stay tuned. Some of those you'll see coming up in the next few months. But if there are specific attributes, if there's things that you're looking for, I know you want a blog built in, but tell me why, for example, this RSS blog widget wouldn't do the trick for you. You're welcome to just put it into the chat pod here is probably the best way if you have some quick thoughts about that. What else do we have? Yeah, the RSS feed, Chris Kellett developed it. It was his epiphany, and it rocks the house. It's an amazing implementation, really is. And if you have questions or concerns, ask Chris. When you go to get it from the Muse directory, it has a link to a chat section that he set up just to support the Nomad Dreamers widgets. So that directory has a SoundCloud. It has actually a streaming audio widget. You can put your own sound and have your own player. It has a background video that streams content from YouTube or Vimeo. It also has a Shopify button. Actually, there's a Shopify button that we're not using in the site that's on the directory. There's also a Shopify widget. The button is terrific in that you can take any object on your design canvas, and when you click it, it will bring up a pop-up of a collection that you have within Shopify. The widget actually will extract the image, the description, and the button from the Shopify site in an iframe on your site. So that one's pretty terrific. There's also an example of a Jotform widget. That's really just an iframe, but Jotform supports things like being able to browse and upload a file, and we show that on the site. So Justin says, I have a customer who has no idea what a blog is, so having a blogging tool inside Muse would be very useful. Justin, are you saying that the site owner is going to use Muse to update the site? Are you going to, if you have a blogging tool in there, I can't say enough, Tumblr is free and it's so easy to use for a site owner, and then you can integrate that within Muse. Are you advocating that you would give the tool to, you want your client to use Muse to publish? Because that's a different bit of a working model. In-browser editing allows you to do some level of changes, but not full blogging. You can't add new repeatable regions at the moment. There are ideas that we toy with there. So Justin says some sort of login. Yeah. No, I know what you're saying. I mean, if you want to, if the goal is to let your business owner come in and update their site. Question is, does in-browser editing allow you to do that in a reasonable way? Do you want to have a blogging engine? And if so, there are some good ideas that are rolling around there. Who's she? She's a nightmare. Oh, your client. Try Tumblr, swear to God. It's pretty graceful. I've used it with my father. I use it with my son's rowing team with like 16 parents that are also nightmares. The little app for phone, tablet works really well. So Android and iOS support for phone. They can take videos. They can type it right in. It blows right through the system. All right. We can't talk about your client anymore because she'll catch us. So I'm going to probably stop at this point. I will come back with a link to this recording. And I'm going to switch to the closing session. I'm not going far. We have another 11 minutes, so if you have more questions, go ahead and throw them in there. If there were things you thought we would cover on this topic, let me know now, because you can't give me a fell below expectations without telling me what didn't hit the mark. And what would you like to see for future sessions? We are going to be talking a lot about what's new in 2 weeks and going forward for a few weeks after that, because there's a lot of new that we got to talk about. But if there are topics like exploring color integration in Adobe, I'd love to hear about it. We would love to focus on that a little bit too. I don't know that I could give you a jam session on exploring color in Muse, but I would love your feedback. If you're not part of the private beta, please come and join that. I'm going to give you the URL for the private beta right now. So museprerelease.com. You have to have a valid Adobe ID, an Adobe login, but if you do that and you agree to keep secrets secret until we say it's time to talk about them, the private pre-release is a great place to give us feedback about design and features you'd like to see in Muse. One area of focus would be color, so letting us know more about what you'd like to see in the way of color capabilities within the application. Pre-release is a great place to jump in on that right now. So around working with new mobile applications and integration with Muse, give me more information about that. What do you mean? I'm going to go grab the recording and I'll be right back.